Hey everybody, it's Mike, aka Sinaku from Overground here, and today we are going to be going over the slash Angemon Mega Zoo control list that was featured in the previous late night testing video that we posted on our channel the other day. That was just something fun that we had recorded while we were fooling around with this idea, and we wanted to see if we could actually capture kind of, lightning in a bottle and see if we could actually steal a couple games. And surprisingly, it did. Unfortunately, there was a small instance where it was like 2 in the morning, and when we flipped Flower Cannon in security, we got so caught up with the fact that Flower Cannon was going to tap the Omnimon that we forgot that Omnimon was actually supposed to take another security because it had Wergarurumon as an inheritable. So would that have changed the outcome of the game? I'm not sure. It could have potentially at least pushed it to a game 3. So is this a true testament to how this deck functions? No. Is this deck super fun to play, and does it have some potential? Yes. And I'm going to be going over each color individually as to show what it kind of brings to this deck and how everything kind of ties together. There's a lot to unpack here, so bear with me as I kind of go through everything. Now, normally each deck I would show you, the Digimon, then the options, then the Tamers, but in this case I'm going to show every color individually and kind of break down what each color does and how they complement each other. So we'll start off with the yellow, and the yellow is kind of the main engine of the deck, and that is through TK. So TK does a number of things in this deck that you wouldn't quite expect. And now all of the yellow cards are kind of tied together, so it's going to be a bit of a cyclical conversation as I talk about everything. So I apologize if I get a little confusing, but I'll try to make this make as much sense as possible. So for this to make sense, we're going to start with TK. So the first thing TK does is that when you play it, it allows you to add any card from your security to your hand, and if it's a yellow, you get to recover 1. Now, I say any card because that's very important. As you notice, we're playing a multitude of different colors, and that requires us to have very specific cards on the table in order to trigger our very powerful options. And these options include, Hammer Spark, Gaia Force, Flower Cannon. So what TK allows us to do is that allows us to pick out any color from our security stack that we're missing that could pursue our engine forward. But if we were to add a yellow card instead, or if that's our best option, we can also trigger the Recover 1 ability. And what Recovery does in this deck is twofold. First of all, not only does it actually keep you in the game, keep you alive, and give you an extra life, it also adds one of these very powerful option cards into your security stack for your opponent to potentially trigger later. This will also tie into the 4 Magna Angemon up here. So Magna Angemon is a cool turn 1 play because, again, it gets you Recovery 1 immediately, and it gives you the potential to put one of these powerful cards or a very powerful Mega into your security stack right away. And basically, the main theory with this deck is that you want every single security check to give you as much value or as much advantage as possible. And because you're playing so many high-level Mega cards, the odds of your opponent hitting a high-level Mega in your stack is very likely. So mostly everything they're going to be throwing at your stack in the early game is probably going to be destroyed, and that just kind of paves the way for you to kind of just keep plowing forward. But furthermore, they run the risk of running into Terra Force, running into Flower Cannon, running into Seven Heavens, running into Hammer Sparks that could potentially end their turn depending on where they are in their memory management. So the recovery aspect as a whole allows you to kind of not only stay alive but manipulate your security in a way that can kind of screw with your opponent and kind of makes them play a little bit more awkwardly. So to tie into the Magna Angemons, we're also playing a full set of Slash Angemons, and the Slash Angemons tie together with TK because since TK allows you to go to 3 every turn, if you can set up a Magna Angemon with a TK on board, or if your opponent attacks into your security and they run into a TK, which is also a possibility, it means that on your next turn you can immediately play Slash Angemon and destroy, or potentially destroy, one of your opponent's Digimon. And if not destroy it, you can reduce it to a point where you could run it over. Then the other yellow cards we're playing to kind of complement the entire engine is just 3 Magna Digimon, because again, you can fish it out of your security with TK to heal yourself later on in the turn, because since you're giving your opponent so much memory every turn, it's quite possible that they're going to be just kind of hitting things out of your stack relatively quickly, or large amounts out of your stack at any given time. So Magna Digimon, again, with their recovery mechanic, allows you to stay alive longer and keep more cards flowing into your security for your opponent to potentially deal with. And then the Seven Heavens is just, it's another form of removal in this deck. And if it's not straight removal, it reduces your opponent's DP to a point where they might not want to attack into your security anymore, because then that Digimon might potentially be destroyed. So for example, like if my opponent has their own Omnimon and they attack with a different Digimon and flip Seven Heavens, I can target their Omnimon. That means that their Omnimon is now swinging for 5,000. So they might be less inclined to attack with this Omnimon because everything else in the stack might potentially destroy it. So that's it for the yellow engine. Then we're going to move on to the blue engine. And the blue engine is kind of where the whole control aspect comes from, on top of, keeping your opponent off Digimon with slash Angemon in that effect. So blue is where you're going to manipulate your memory to a point where playing all these big expensive cards doesn't actually give your opponent that much memory to work with on their turn. And you're going to do this through the Gomamon Leomon package, which is also supplemented by, you can ideally run any 5 blue Digi-Eggs. It doesn't have to necessarily be these 5. In the game that we tested the other night, I was playing 4 Sunomon and a Wanimon just because the Upamons were in use by the Omnimon Blue deck. If you have access to Upamons, I think that's the best one because it just gives you more draw power and more consistency. But you're playing just any 5 blue babies because if you hatch them, it automatically gives you access to Hammer Spark. And when you evolve into either a Gagumon or a Gomamon, it's more draw power to kind of accelerate all your stuff as a whole. So we're playing the Gomamon and the Leomon package, so that way you can evolve into Leomon on top of Gomamon, and you're attacking into your opponent's security, and if that dies, you'll get 3 memory for free. And when you combo that with the TK, that means you're basically starting the turn with 6 memory. So when you play all these big cards, you're not actually giving your opponent the heights of 8, 9, 10 that you normally would in regular circumstances. And especially if you can combo that with like a slash Angemon, you're going to go to give your opponent 1 memory, you get to recover 1, and now you're primed into position to play slash Angemon on the following turn. And you can choke your opponent out in the same way. Furthermore, we also play the 4 Hammer Sparks rather, to kind of increase your memory and mitigate the amount of memory you're going to be giving your opponent based on the cards that you have to play in any given circumstance. And to follow that up, we're going to play 2 Metal Digimon, and the Metal Digimon is in here for 2 reasons. It lets you control the tempo of the board by bouncing 2 level 4 lower Digimon to your opponent's hand, and 9 times out of 10 you're reserving this to get rid of your opponent's blockers, so that way you can set up a game shot on the following turn. Furthermore, Metal Digimon is here because he gives you access to Omnimon, and that's further supplemented by the red cards that we're going to get into a second. So Metal Digimon also lets you attack through blockers without a source, and sometimes the way you play this deck is that your opponent will kind of use, like say they're at like 7 or 8, they'll use 5 to just kind of play a blocker for free without necessarily having to evolve over it. So if you've got Metal Digimon in your back pocket, that means that that blocker that they played for free under the pretense that it would keep them safe moving forward, actually he can just phase right through, which is really, really, really neat. He also lets him attack over things that are tapped that your opponent wouldn't be able to protect if they have a blocker without a source. And it gives you kind of a cool way to keep the tempo in your advantage as well. So that's Metal Digimon. That's the blue package. So yellow is your main control and manipulation. Blue is going to be your main memory manipulation, so that way you can keep playing these cards for cheap. And then we're going to move on to red and green. And then these are kind of the I guess they're also control elements in a way, but I was going to say they're more the tech side of everything. So in the red package, we're playing 2 ties, and that it gives us a card on board that gives us free access to Terraforce. And the reason we're playing 2 is, again, to complement the entire recovery package, is that playing recovery allows us to put ties into our security stack from the top of our deck. So that means if our opponent attacks into it, we can just play tie for free, and that automatically gives us access to any Terraforces that are in our hand. Similarly to the Izzy that you're going to see down here as well. Another cool thing that all these 2-cost Hammers bring to the table as well is that with TK, since you're going to 3, you can play these 2-cost Hammers to put you to 1, and then most of your big boss monsters cost 11, and then you just give your opponent the straight 10. This is the worst case scenario, obviously. We're not factoring in all the memory manipulation that you can do here as well. But tie, if you can ideally get 2 ties up as well, it makes all of your big Digimon 12,000, so that means that they can at least trade with other main vanilla megas on the field. They can't necessarily get over things in security, but you're not too concerned about that. So the red package, again, we're just playing for Terraforce, just so you can help with removal and kind of keep your opponent off of things. That way you can keep yourself alive in the interim. And then Volcanic Dramon, similar to Metal Dramon, he's here for Omnimon access, but the Volcanic Dramon is also good in a wide variety of matchups because, again, in situations where you're giving your opponent a lot of memory, they might just decide to go super, super wide and Ricky Rush you in the hopes that since you're not really playing any blockers, that they can just kill you on the following turn. So with Volcanic Dramon, you can kind of mitigate that threat. And furthermore, it allows you to get Sturdy Attack +1 going back into your turn. And finally, the green package, and not to mention as well, Terraforce is really good in your security. So with all your recovery engines, you can potentially throw one of those 4 into your security. But worst case scenario, if you do end up drawing them, that's what you have these cards for as well. And then finally, the green package, we're playing 3 Flower Cannon, mostly because this is the one card I found is dead the most often. but we're going to complement that with 2 Puppetmon and then 1 Izzy. So the Puppetmon, again, is just kind of a tech choice to drop whenever the situation needs it to stay alive, to suppress your opponent's board, and set up for ways to deal with your opponent's board going back into your turn. And the one of Izzy is actually a really neat tech, because if you can get it on board with a Puppetmon, Izzy says that you just need to have a level 5 or higher grade and play to trigger it. But when you reveal the top card of your deck after you tap them, it just needs to be any Digimon card, and you can add it to your hand. So because you're playing so many good Digimon cards, this one Izzy in combination with a Puppetmon on board can actually pretty much tutor your entire deck, which is kind of neat. Like you can even like rip an Omnimon off the top, which is really cool. And then again, if Izzy is in play, we can actually play the Flower Cannons from our hand, but otherwise we're kind of relying on all our recovery cards to put the Flower Cannon into our security so our opponent can trip it, and then that can save us from them swinging out with their entire board. And then finally, the last 2 cards we've alluded to several times is the Omnimon. Again, this is just kind of a game ender as necessary. It can help deal with threats, and it's a double attacker at worst. Also, what's really cool about it is that it lets you recycle the megas that you evolve from on top of it back into your hand, and it lets you play them again further down the road to deal with your opponent's threats. So that is it. I think I've covered everything. I think it's made all the sense based on the theories in my head. But yeah, this is really fun. It's really interesting, and it kind of allows me to play the game in a much different way than what I'm used to, because I'm so used to playing like Omnimon Blue, and especially Omnimon Blue Mirrors, and now lately I've been playing Green as well. So I'm so used to kind of playing that, you know, super tight choke game, and with this game it's just kind of like throw your hand on the table and you don't really care what your opponent has or does, because everything that you play is going to do something and kind of get you ahead in some capacity. But yeah, I'm having a great time with this list. I really hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys can try it out and fool around with it, maybe see if there's anything you would change as well. If you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment on this video. If you like this video and you like what we do here at Overground, please like and subscribe. And yeah, that's all for today, folks. I'm Mike, aka Sinaku, once again, and have a good one, guys.